Good morning, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and we are providing a regular update on the district's response to COVID-19. I'm joined today by Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, as well as members of my cabinet. Council Chairman Mendelson will provide his regular press briefing regarding the council's upcoming legislative session. Before I turn it over to Chairman Mendelson and follow with a COVID update and take your questions, I want to make a hearty congratulations to Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and President-elect Joseph Biden, who will become the 46th President of the United States of America. We look forward to welcoming back the Vice President and now President-elect Biden to Washington, D.C., and to the White House, and welcoming Senator Harris, now Vice President-elect, to Washington to help lead our nation. We are all excited to welcome this president who will support D.C. values, including statehood for Washington, D.C. So once again, congratulations. I know our city is rejoicing, and I will just extend my thanks again to all of the election workers, the Board of Elections, and all of the voters who made their voices heard and delivered a big victory in our 3 electoral votes to Biden-Harris administration. So once again, let me turn over now on the mic to Council Chairman Phil Mendelson.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser, and good morning to everyone. This is again the press conference that I have with the press before we have a legislative meeting, and tomorrow, November 10th, the council will be meeting its regular meeting for November 2020. And I want to echo what the mayor said with regard to congratulations to the president-elect and vice president-elect. And thanks to all those who came out to vote, and also thanks to everyone who worked the polls as election workers. And actually everybody else who worked the polls as volunteers for candidates. The council has a legislative meeting tomorrow. It's our regular meeting for the month of November, and it will be preceded by a Committee of the Whole meeting, which will be an additional meeting of the Committee of the Whole, meaning not regularly scheduled. We are nearing the end of Council Period 23, so we have a lot of business that's coming out of the committees. The Council is scheduled to meet tomorrow, again November 17th, December 1st, and then December 15th will be the last Council meeting of Council Period 23. There are something like over a dozen measures that are going to be marked up in the Committee of the Whole tomorrow, including 2 interstate compacts, a psychology interjurisdictional compact, which, if I remember correctly, concerns basically telemedicine for psychologists, and the interstate physical therapy compact. There are several ceremonial street designations, but also several bills dealing with street or alley closings. 2 of those measures are to the benefit of Sursum Corda, which is a project off of North Capitol Street that's been a long time in the works, and I'm hopeful these are the final legislative acts necessary for that project to get to completion. I believe the construction has already begun. We have a number of confirmations in the Committee of the Whole for markup, including the Executive Director of the Commission on Arts and Humanities, Haran Sareki-Baran, as well as confirmation of 6 nominations by the mayor for membership on the Commission on Arts and Humanities. If I remember correctly, I believe 3 are reappointments and 3 are new. And then 4 nominations by the mayor to the Historic Preservation Review Board, which I'm proposing the Committee of the Whole mark up favorably. I expect we will, and the council will vote on later tomorrow. There are also, I'm not going to go through every measure, but I believe the agendas were circulated to the press yesterday. There are 7 revenue bond resolutions, which are a way of providing a lower interest tax rate to help with economic development projects. We're not talking about anything controversial here like National Public Radio or Public Welfare Foundation. I believe Children's Hospital is one of the beneficiaries as well. The Committee of the Whole will be followed by a legislative meeting. At the legislative meeting, and I'm not going to go through every measure here, but I'll take questions if there are any. We will have final reading on a bill called Racial Equity Achieves Change. I think it's actually Racial Equity Achieves Results Amendment Act, which is establishing offices dealing with racial equity in both the executive and legislative branches to try to increase the understanding, sensitivity to, and look at ways that we can change to improve equity, and in particular racial equity, in decisions that are made by the council as well as by executive branch agencies. Not only is that going through final reading tomorrow, but it also is on the agenda for immediate enactment as an emergency bill. We'll have final reading on a bill addressing dyslexia and other reading difficulties in our schools. That the implementation of that will be slightly delayed because it is subject to appropriation. There are several measures for final reading that have a nexus to economic development, including an alley closing for a development project proposed off of Howard Road near the Anacostia Metro Station in Ward 8, as well as a closing and dedication of streets and alleys for the Park Morton site to enable the redevelopment there, which will include affordable housing as well as mixed income housing. I know because there's been some attention to this in the press, there might be interest in the bill Minor Consent for Vaccinations Amendment Act, which is up for final reading tomorrow, and I do expect that that will be approved. That's a bill that permits underage kids, I believe it's over the age of 11, to be vaccinated, but they have to go through, without their parents' consent, but they have to go through a process that includes a physician's approval. So it's not just simply a kid can just walk in and get vaccinated. There was some attention to that at first reading, and I expect that the final reading tomorrow will be approved. And then some of the other emergency bills, there aren't that many, I think there's 6. I don't think any of them are controversial. I'd already mentioned Racial Equity Achieves Results is on the agenda as an emergency bill, so it becomes effective right away. There's a bill that will enable improvements to go forward with regard to the DuPont Underground. That's funding that we put in the budget that clarifies that the DEMPED can go through the bid with infrastructure improvements where we've budgeted for them. And there's an emergency bill that will approve a contract that the Events DC has submitted to the council that will enable the $9 million that the council budgeted for excluded workers, undocumented and excluded workers, to get out the door. So that's not controversial. It's sort of like anticlimactic, but that it's important, and that's on the agenda tomorrow, as well as a bill to enact on an emergency basis what we've approved on a permanent basis, but takes longer to become law, regarding a preference that will enable Berea Public Charter School to continue with its parent-child dual enrollment preference as a model for education. Those are the highlights with tomorrow's agenda. I'm happy to take questions if there are any on whatever I mentioned or anything else regarding tomorrow's meeting. Sarah?
You talked about the vaccination without parents' consent. So you're saying that there has to be a physician to approve this?
Yes, this isn't just simply where a child can just walk into wherever one would find a vaccine and just get themselves vaccinated.
No parent consent. The parents that weren't involved or something like that, or what was the idea?
Well, what we have seen, and this really, I think, came to public consciousness earlier this year with regard to measles and the fact that there was a recurrence of measles, not just here but around the country, is that there is this anti-vaccination movement that, I mean, that's adults who have decided that vaccines are dangerous, it kind of goes against the science. But because of that, they withhold vaccinating their children. And so this enables a way around that. But it does require adult involvement.
The physician.
Yes. The safeguards are written into the bill. I don't know them all by heart, but there are safeguards in the bill. Are there any other questions? Mr. Rice?
Yes, have you had any conversations with the incoming 2 new council members about committee assignments?
No. I usually don't have those conversations until the end of November or early December.
Do you
I
plan
have
on-
talked with them about congratulating them.
Do you plan on giving the 2 new council members committees in their first years?
Well, you know, my practice has been not to do that, but beyond that, it's also my practice that I don't talk about committee assignments or what might happen until the month of December. I want to talk with members first. I want to talk with all members first and get a sense of what members want. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about the fact that in council period 24, you will have majority females in terms of your colleagues?
I think that's great. And for a number of years, there's been some complaint that there used to be a majority of women council members, and it's been a number of years that there hasn't been. You know, the council is supposed to be representative of the public, and so this is furtherance of that. Bill?
Do you support the mayor's request for overtime payment for police officers?
Are you talking about the $43 million reprogramming?
Yes.
Yeah, I do support that. I wouldn't characterize it the way you did. This is expenditure that's already occurred. And that needs to be clear because there's been misunderstanding about that. That's expenditure that has already occurred in 2020, and the reprogramming was with 2020 dollars that had not been spent. So it is a rebudgeting of last year's money, which is kind of necessary with regard to getting a full accounting before we do the comprehensive annual financial report. So some people have thought that what we're doing is we're increasing the budget for this year or next year, and that's not the case at all. And this is actually money that the federal government owes us, and that's important as well. There's been a long-standing practice, understanding, and really I would say commitment by the federal government that they reimburse us for public safety expenses that relate to our being the nation's capital. You know, when folks come to town to protest at the White House, this isn't a local issue. And I'm glad that folks want to express on a First Amendment basis their views strongly and do it here. But these are expenses that we incur because of the presence of the federal government. The federal government has always repaid us. But somehow they've not seen fit to do that for last year to the tune of about $43 million. If you include what we project to the inaugural, and the mayor knows this better than me, I think we're talking about close to $90 million. And these are expenses that should not be borne by the taxpayers of the district. But that's what we're doing at the moment, and the reprogramming is last year's dollars for last year's costs with regard to public safety. If there are no other questions, I'm not going anywhere. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And we have a short briefing today. Let me turn your attention to our dashboard that shows our case rates, health system capacity, public health system capacity, and level of community engagement with the public health system. So we continue to see, today we report 86 new cases, and unfortunately 1 Washingtonian who has died due to the virus. We also want to emphasize that new travel advisory is in effect beginning today, and this is what you need to know. You can go to coronavirus.dc.gov to read more about it, but we want all DC residents to heed this advisory, as well as people visiting the district. If you are visiting DC, this is what you need to know. Get tested before you travel to the district within 72 hours of traveling. Obviously, if you test positive, don't travel. Visitors should also not come if they are the close contact of a confirmed case, and they would have been notified by their own health agency, or they would know that they are a close contact. If a person is visiting DC for more than 3 days, they need to get tested again within 3 to 5 days of their arrivals, and they may go to one of their test sites, or they may go to one of their health plans recommended by their own doctors before they left home. Let me say something about DC residents returning to the district after traveling to any place other than the DMV or a low-risk state or country, which we will list on our coronavirus.dc.gov website. So for DC residents, limit daily activities and self-monitor for 14 days when you return, or limit daily activities until you get tested for COVID within 3 to 5 days of your return and receive a negative result. And as of today, Maryland, Virginia, Hawaii, and Vermont are exempted from those requirements. We, of course, are very proud of the robust public testing infrastructure that we have built here in the district, and workers can access our testing sites for free. And here you can see a schedule for this week. We will observe Veterans Day on Wednesday, and our testing sites won't be open on that day. So please plan accordingly. You can, of course, always go to your doctor and present for testing as well. Last week, we talked about the availability of in-home or at-home testing kits from LabCorp, and we have put that information up on our website. We want to draw your attention to that so that you can have that available in your home should you need a test. We also want to draw attention to another option that is available to DC residents called the Ready Responders. This is a private healthcare service that residents can call and they will come to your home to provide care or at-home testing. We have both for the information for the LabCorp test kit and Ready Responders on our website at coronavirus.dc.gov/testing. As I mentioned, we are incredibly thankful for this service of more than 30,000 DC residents who call, DC veterans who call DC home, including our own Director Geldhart here. Director Geldhart, we want to thank you for your service, your continued service to your country in this COVID response. And as we observe the holiday, some services will be closed or adjusted, including our testing and mail distribution sites. So please plan ahead, and we will today post a complete list of service adjustments. Speaking of city services, I want to spend a special thank you to Director Geldhart and his crews who were out on Sunday morning cleaning up after Saturday's impromptu and peaceful celebrations in the streets of Washington, D.C. So thank you for all of our public workers who helped to clean up. And we also want to thank our business owners in advance for beginning to promptly remove boards or fencing that were put up last week. The Department of Public Works is coordinating with business improvement districts to arrange roll-off dumpsters so that plywood can be deposited and removed from our business areas. Businesses can also drop off plywood at our Benning Road transfer station. And that site is open Monday through Friday from 7 to 4 p.m. And also a reminder to our candidates who participated in the elections, you should also begin to remove your signage from public space. Just a reminder to candidates, begin to move your signage from public space. DC is also starting leaf collection today. And if you haven't done so yet, please rake or sweep your leaves to the curb or the tree box, not on the street, but to the curb or the tree box. I got some questions from people last week when I mentioned the words tree box and asked me what that was. That's the space between the sidewalk and the street. Where the trees are planted, the tree box. So that's where your leaves should be. And please be mindful of all of our residents who cannot maneuver obstacles like trees in the sidewalk or blocking curb cuts and the like. So be mindful of how you put out your leaves. Finally, I want to remind everyone about DMV Black Restaurant Week. It started yesterday. And we know that business has been difficult for many of our restaurants and eateries. So if you can, please support DMVBlackRestaurantWeek.com. That's DMVBRW.com to learn how you can support a local business. So with that, the chairman and I and members of my team are available for questions. Yes, Sam.
Mayor, you obviously were happy with the election. You said you were, but I was just, I don't know if you could talk a little bit about this. You know, we went up to New York with you when you met then President-elect Trump, and certainly it seemed like you were getting off to a good start. And of course, it ended with Black Lives Matter Plaza, the conflict there. Can you talk a little bit about that, just in terms of the Trump administration and you?
Well, I think that our experience is somewhat unique, but we've experienced everything the country has experienced, and I think that you can see the jubilant reaction to a fresh start for our country. And I'm just as excited about that. Now, you recall that our job is to work with every president, no matter who it is, and especially on the issues that are important to the district. The President of the United States is our neighbor, and while they're here, I'm their mayor. And that is how I will approach every relationship. We have seen this year that the federal government has slighted us by $755 million. They haven't paid their fair share for their own security, which you just heard the chairman speak of. So these are all very significant issues that affect DC residents and businesses, and we will continue. We're going to try to get this administration to do the right thing before they leave, and certainly make the incoming administration aware of what's been missing.
Also, there was, for example, the issue of sanctuary cities. I know that that was kind of an issue with a number of cities. DC, I think, is a sanctuary city. Am I right?
DC does not enforce federal immigration laws, which is what we mean, if that's what you mean by sanctuary cities.
We were threatened with loss of funds for that. I don't know. What about that whole issue?
What about it?
Well, I mean, weren't you concerned at some point that the city could lose federal support over this issue?
We've been very concerned about a number of issues with this administration and immigration issues. The Muslim ban was one of their first public policy initiatives. What they've done to Dreamers and TPS and separating children from their mothers, I think is, personally just devastating for so many people. It's devastating for us as Americans, and it definitely flies in the face of our values as DC residents. So we think and we expect the Biden-Harris administration to not only stop those devastating policies, but to work constructively to replace them with humane policies.
Finally, for me, Alex Trebek.
Yes.
We understand you put out a photograph of yourself with Alex Trebek. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think that some will be surprised at the Alex Trebek's impact, but I was told that he'd been doing Jeopardy for 37 years, going into people's living rooms, people of all backgrounds and beliefs, blue states, red states, and providing fun, informative entertainment. And I've been a Jeopardy fan. I had the privilege of being invited when they were filming here at Constitution Hall, and I think a number of our teachers were featured in that week. And I recorded a question or two, and from time to time they replay it. And people will call me, I just saw you on Jeopardy, I just saw you on Jeopardy, I just saw you on Jeopardy. And so Alex will be missed. He lived his life, it seemed, with great honor. And he faced a very tough diagnosis in the end of his life with great grace as well. So he will be missed. Yes.
Mayor Bowser, a couple of questions. First on your congratulations to the Vice President-elect first before President-elect Biden. Can you talk about that first, why you chose her first, and also, are you hearing any more interest regarding her going to Howard University? Have you heard any more about people expressing more interest now in the local school that she attended, and it's an HBCU at that?
Oh, well, we've heard quite a lot about that. I wouldn't read anything into my order in congratulations. That was I don't know, sometimes when I talk out of order perhaps, but I'm very happy for both of them. And I am very happy for Howard University, that I think even through the pandemic had a banner year of interest and registrations and enrollment, but they would be the ones to better speak about that.
Question about some of the celebrations in DC this weekend. In the past, you've been vocal about people going to White House Rose Garden celebrations out of concern for coronavirus. Where were those warnings this weekend with the impromptu celebrations, and are you telling people at this time not to go to the inauguration? We're hearing now reports that hotels are already getting booked up.
We haven't made any comments about the inauguration other than we are in our planning phase with the federal government, and as the Vice President-elect forms an inauguration committee, we will talk to them as well. The first part of your question was what?
The coronavirus concerns. Are you
Yeah.
telling people not to come to the inauguration because of those concerns?
We haven't. I haven't mentioned whether people should come to the inauguration or that. We're in the very early stages of working with the Presidential Inaugural Committee.
Maybe if Dr. Nesbitt can also weigh in on this. I mean, do you have concerns with cases rising across the country that people are planning to do this and people are still gathering outside of the White House now?
You know, I think you've heard a number of people talk about this. We're in a pandemic, but we also have an election every 4 years, and people are expressing how they feel, and they're expressing their emotions. It didn't go without remark from the public health leadership community in terms of what people needed to do. It didn't go unnoticed that some people wore masks and some people did not. But we're going to be concerned. We are in a global pandemic in this country. Prior to the election on Tuesday, we made people aware of the number of activities that are happening in our country, including people continuing to have small gatherings in their homes and not wear masks, including people continuing to have a number of other social activities that increase risk for transmission. So while We will continue to monitor what the impact of people's response on Saturday to the president-elect and vice president-elect will have long-term. There'll be a host of things that we will also continue to monitor that contributes to our increased rates of transmission. What people need to be mindful of largely across the country is that everything you do can have an impact on increasing transmission while we continue to be in a global pandemic where just about every state and jurisdiction in our nation is experiencing a rise in cases.
Mayor Bowser, looking at how the elections played out in D.C., obviously you were a big proponent of opening up all 144 precincts. That didn't happen. We implemented a vote-by-mail system, sending ballots to every voter, and we went with larger but fewer vote centers on election day. And overall, it seemed to go smoothly for most voters. So I'm curious about what your perspective is, and if you'd want to see the district go back to how it used to vote, or if you're a fan of how things went this time around, and would be interested in seeing that moving forward.
Well, I am pleased that at no point during the election did we have 2 to 3 hour waits for voting like we had in the primary, which to me was it was very concerning. And I think that I'll have some time to look at everything, which we haven't, I don't think they finished counting the vote, so we don't have a complete after action. So I can give you kind of my gut feeling. But I think every person having a ballot was helpful, even if they voted in person, like I did. I voted in person, but I had the insurance of having my ballot at home if I went to the vote center and something wasn't the way I liked. So I think that was good. Many people used their ballots at a drop box, not the U.S. mail, which I think was also good for people who were scared about the mail. People in short order recognized that drop box was the government, not the mail. So I think that was very important. I am going to be curious to see, which I haven't had time to break down, is the energy around the use. Is it universal across the city, or is it more demanded at different parts of the city? So I'll be interested to hear more about that. As far as the vote centers go, I also want to look at how those worked. I was very proud of my team. I want to acknowledge Jay Melder, who was our liaison with the Board of Elections, around making sure that all the vote centers were set up, had plexiglass, had hand sanitizer, had workers or support from DC government if they needed it. As well as having the vote boxes installed, the drop boxes, and making sure that, they work with the board to do a security assessment so that there will be some confidence in the safety of those ballots as well. So I think those are some of the things that we'll want to continue to see how it worked and what needed to be tweaked as well. So I think when it comes down to it, many people trusted the mail-in ballot and many people voted in person. So I think that so far I'm pleased with what I've seen. I do think, and that's not just for us and our board, that growing confidence in voting by mail, the ballots are going to have to get counted more quickly. We didn't have, as it turns out, a close election here. But I would want to see how we can make the tabulation of mail-in ballots quicker. Yes.
Mayor Bowser, have you talked to President-elect Biden or Vice President-elect Harris, or have you reached out to their people yet to talk to them in any way, congratulate or talk about the future?
I certainly have offered my congratulations. And we will continue to offer congratulations and be in touch with the transition team. I had the opportunity to go up to Wilmington on the night and talk to a couple of the people involved with the vice president's team. And at the appropriate time, we'll reach out to them to welcome them officially to the district. When was the night was that Saturday night? Saturday, for the speech.
Oh, so you were for the speech on
I
Saturday.
was.
And then, can you talk, or somebody talk a little bit about you mentioned taking the boards down from businesses and that you're urging them to do that, and I'm just wondering, what gives you this sense of confidence that all is safe now, that all is clear? The president still has not conceded. He's still fighting in court. There's still people out there who, don't want to give up this fight yet. And so, are you calling the all clear? Are you confident that businesses can take down the boards and there's no
Well,
fear?
I never suggested that businesses should put up the boards. And while we can never ensure that there's no one person or small group of people who want to cause havoc in the city, we believe that we put out the necessary resources to keep DC safe. And we're very, and we will be able to monitor very closely if we think we have a specific problem. But I don't think that calls for a widespread, all 8 boards going up. So that's why I think they should come down.
Can you give us any data on whether or not there were any arrests Saturday or Sunday around the Black Lives Matter Plaza or around celebrations?
I don't think that there were, Mark. I think that the last report that the chief gave was on election night, and I think that was the last time we had arrests related to any election activity. But I could be wrong, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we did.
Ask about the travel restrictions, and so now there are, I guess, 46 states that are considered high risk. If I do the math backwards, is that correct?
There were, where's the slide that shows the states? Vermont and Hawaii, I think, and plus Maryland and Virginia are exempt.
And so, in reading your mayor's order after it came out, it seems like the restrictions that you have as far as self-quarantining and testing are voluntary, and that hotels don't have to ask if they don't want to, and people don't have to provide this information. So, what are people to take from that? Like, how serious is this? I know you want...
It's just as serious as everything that we've done, Mark. It's just as serious as the 14-day quarantine that we know that people followed to keep themselves safe. Some people didn't follow, and we have to make sure that we spread the word far and wide that this is our expectation. Our business owners have worked with us shoulder to shoulder throughout the response to this pandemic. They also want to keep their patrons safe, their businesses ongoing. And what I have discovered in that is that there is protection in working with the government and following the government's rules for business owners. And that's why they seek out our guidance, and that's why they followed our guidance.
And can I just follow up? We're 2 days in a row now with 3% positivity rate. We see some places in Maryland that are rolling back some of the going backwards in restrictions, making, putting in tougher restrictions back in place as far as dining out and whatnot. Just wondering if you and Dr. Nezzer can weigh in on this. Just what can we expect? It does not seem that the numbers are going in the direction that any of us want them to go in. What are you guys considering as far as steps that you guys can take to push those numbers back in the other direction, aside from obviously the travel restrictions we're talking about now?
Well, we've been pretty conservative already, Mark, more conservative than our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia. So I don't know exactly the things that they're rolling back, but they're probably rolling back some things that we never advanced. And so this is where we are right now. We are constantly evaluating, and we don't have anything more to report. Yes.
Why Vermont and Hawaii?
Their rates are less than 10 per 100,000. Yes.
Also, I know I asked you about the inauguration, and you said, basically it's still in the works for planning. The question, though, on, we've seen past events, renting out their places for all the folks coming to town. Does the city, have the authority to prohibit people from doing that this time around, given COVID-19 concerns?
Why would we do that?
If you're concerned, if there's a concern about people coming from out of state.
Oh, you mean, do we want to stop people from using hotels? We will not be closing down our hotels. Hotels, according to our guidance, can be used.
Airbnb, though, specifically is when people can rent out spaces in their private homes to those coming from out of town. Does the city also have the authority to prevent people from being able to do that this time around?
I suppose we could. We have regulated Airbnb. Well, the chairman has regulated Airbnb.
Just another question. One thing we haven't really been talking about now is crime in D.C. Homicide numbers today, highest since they've been in 2008. I mean, at this point, what can you tell D.C. residents that you haven't already told them about addressing this?
Well, we continue to be concerned, as you are, and I appreciate you noting a local issue for this conversation. We did not, and we continue to see parts of our city plagued by gun violence and, fortunately, homicide. So we will continue to work with our officers and our community to make sure that people who are using guns are brought to justice. Yes.
Mayor Bowser, can you or Dr. Nesbitt provide any update on DC Can? Are people installing it? Has it?
Sure. Dr. Nesbitt. And can we go back to the dashboard, please?
Yes, so we'll be providing that data later, either this week or next week, as part of our community engagement metrics.
Are you still on track, DCPS still on track to start CARES next week?
I believe so. Or the latest date that I got was the 18th. But yeah, is that right, Chris? Yeah. If that's next week, I'm getting my calendar mixed up.
Have you gotten the results? Have you reached out to parents like you did for the in-person classes to get data from them on how many parents are interested and want to do the in-person CARES program and how many don't?
I believe that outreach has been going on for a week, Mark, and will continue. And it'll be on a rolling. CARES is a rolling admission. So we'll start with certain grade levels, and then the number of CARES classrooms will grow until we hit the demand that from parents.
If I could ask, you had mentioned reimbursement. I know in the past, Director Rodriguez had updated us on where the district stood, how much money you had requested and how much had come back in. Is there an update on that? You mentioned, I think you threw out a $90 million figure that DC is still owed by the feds. Can you
Well, there are a couple of different things. The number that I think the chairman was referring to earlier is we informed the federal government some weeks ago, and Chris will remember this, about the emergency. Give me the Chris, can you give them rundown that?
The Emergency Planning and Security Fund.
Right.
EPSF.
And we can share a letter with you that we sent that described, I think, 2 years previous where the fund had not been reimbursed appropriately. So it was kind of in the hole. And then we went into this year, 2020, with substantial First Amendment activity, which that fund should pay for. And because the fund was already in the hole, it couldn't pay for regular activity, less more this level of activity that we've had this year. And so we've had to front the fund, those dollars, and we're seeking that reimbursement. That's a separate issue from public assistance that is provided through FEMA. And at present, we qualify for 75% reimbursement on FEMA-eligible COVID responses. And we have reported on that number previously. That is an ongoing submission to FEMA. I was pleased last week to host the FEMA Administrator, Pete Gaynor, and thank them personally for their work with the district. He was also wanting to let us know that they continue to work on vaccination distribution. So I don't know if we have an update. Actually, we did. They gave us an update on some additional monies being approved. Do you have that number off the top, Chris?
Yes, Mayor. So when the mayor met with the FEMA administrator, talked about public assistance, and right now we're at about 91 million that's been obligated back to the district for COVID-related response operations.
Million you've received?
Yes.
How much have you requested?
We've, as of last Friday, we had requested $175 million. But don't do the math in your head from 90 and 75 because, and 175 because that 175, the delta, is still being reviewed by FEMA for reimbursement. So that's still in FEMA's process for reimbursement.
They haven't denied anything.
No, they have not, Mark. They have not denied any of our requests.
Is this part of the 490?
The 490 is separate and apart, and we refer to that as the CARES funding. Some of that money can be used for emergency response, but we obviously wouldn't use that for anything that's FEMA reimbursable. Thank you, everybody.